Hi, I'm Kathy, the art teacher from Art Projects for Kids. Today's art video is about how to make a collage like the quilts from a small town in Alabama called Gee's Bend. Women there have been making them for generations and they're really good at it. Let me tell you a little more about them. The women at Gee's Bend started quilting to keep themselves warm, but eventually approached their quilt making like a work of art. Fortunately for us, we can kind of imitate their look using just an assortment of colored paper. I recommend at least 5 different colors of cardstock so you have some variety. You'll also need a pair of scissors and a glue stick. A key thing to remember about this project is that you are to use all of the paper, just like the Gee's Bend quilters used all of their fabric. A good amount of paper for this project is one 8.5 inch by 5.5 inch sheet for the background and 4 5.5 inch by 2 3/4 inch panels to cut up for the quilt pieces. This should give you enough to get some layers on your collage, but not so many that the background is all covered up. The next step is to start cutting. In order to make a variety of sizes, which will keep things interesting to look at, here's a good plan to follow. Take each strip and cut it in half, then take that piece and cut it in half to make quarters, and then take that piece and cut it in half to make eighths. Repeat this step for all of your strips. Keep in mind the cuts don't have to be perfectly square. In fact, slightly crooked ones will look even more like an old handmade quilt. So that's a pretty good start to make a variety of sizes, but it would be nice to have some really small squares too. To make those, take a 1/8 size piece, cut it once to make a 1/16, and once again to make a couple of 1/32 size squares. See, math language sometimes helps with art projects too. Do these cuts to all 4 strips and then you'll really have a lot of sizes for your collage. And now to assemble your quilt collage. Start with one of the largest sizes of rectangles, add some glue, and decide where you want to place it. It's nice to leave a little border around the edge so the background color will always show too. Continue to glue and place these large rectangles on your paper. They can either be horizontal or vertical. It's good to spread these shapes out so you get as much color showing as possible. And here's the last piece getting glued down. I'm still leaving a border around the edge so it looks a lot like a real quilt. And now comes the next largest size pieces. Add some glue and start to spread these shapes out too. You can look to see if there are still any large spaces to fill in. After the background is filled in, you can start to make layers. Notice I'm still lining things up to keep my dark blue border edge. And now comes the next largest squares. Placing shapes on contrasting colors is always a good idea. You want your squares to show up. I personally like to line up the sides because I know that's how lots of quilt blocks are made. But you can, of course, design your quilt to look however you want. That does include even more cutting and gluing if you want. I'm just keeping my quilt kind of basic so you can see the process. Now it's time to place the next to the last size pieces. Add glue and look for larger spaces to fill in. Try to spread these shapes out in a way that seems balanced and looks nice. Look for larger spaces that you can fill. Spreading out colors might help you decide where to put things too. And now we're getting near the end and should be left with just a collection of the very smallest pieces. Glue them down on contrasting colors so they show up really well. If you try to fill empty spaces, that should create a nice composition. And then one last check to see that everything is glued down really well. Lucky for us, there isn't anything to clean up, as all the paper pieces have been used. That's just like what the Gee's Bend quilt makers did as they learned not to waste anything. Finally, here are a couple more examples of how a collage might look when starting with a different background. These are using the same palette of blues, but a collection of very different colors would look great too. All kinds of possibilities. Hey, I want to thank you for following along with me today. Please check out my website, Art Projects for Kids, for more art projects like this one. You'll find how to make a collage like Kandinsky and how to make a collage like Matisse. I'll see you next time, and I hope you keep on making art.